Yo, everybody. Welcome to Off Panel, a weekly interview podcast about all things comics, brought to you by Sketch.com. I'm your host, David Harper, and this week's guest is the writer behind a whole lot of comics, but right now they include Action Comics, Superman, Legion of Superheroes, and a whole lot more. It's Brian Michael Bendis. Thanks for coming on, Brian.
Hey, thank you. I got to tell you, you have been so lovely and diligent asking me to do this podcast. And just so people know why I'm on today, someone had tweeted you about me or something, and you said, "Yeah, I've been trying to get him for years." And I was just like on my couch, just trying to like process the world's work, and I decided to go, "Who's this guy?" No, he hasn't. And then I go look at my email. You absolutely have, in the nicest way. For, may I say, years. I don't mean to, but like about once a year, you would come looking for me, and there it all was in my junk folder.
Oh man!
And yeah, and I was so embarrassed, and I was so happy that we could connect this way. So thank you for your diligence. I hope this is in any way worth it.
Well, no problem. Honestly, that's the funny thing about doing a podcast, or really anything. If people only knew how many emails people really send for this type of stuff.
Absolutely.
I will say that I DM'd the guy who tagged you in that afterwards, and I'm pretty sure like I made his, or like this whole thing like made his year. He was like, "What? It actually happened because I tagged him?" I was like, "Yep."
Yeah, 100% did. And that's like the genuinely one of my favorite parts of social media is how fans help. They just do. Readers just help all the time. They help with research. They help with connections. I quite a few of my followers are just constantly sending me the new hotness. Whoever's like art is just driving them crazy and just tags me. Hey, look at this. And they've been right. I've hired quite a few people.
That's amazing.
So I'm always delighted when someone tags me in something, and I must say, genuinely always right. It's never nonsense. They're always like, yeah, I would like that. So thank you.
I love it. Well, so instead of a typical podcast, we're going to do something a little different with Brian, as it's his first time on the show, where we're going to touch on a lot of the big moments from his career, including individual projects, to talk about what he learned, what carried forward with him, and a whole lot more. Brian, are you ready to dive into this?
Yeah, get in there.
Okay, when I say I'm talking about your whole career, I'm really talking about the whole career. We're going to start with Fire, aka Goldfish, and Jinx. I had a very specific thing I wanted to talk about this, because you started making comics, for college credit, specifically with Parts of a Whole. That you were heavily doing it as a cartoonist because when you were a kid, you wanted to be a comic artist, not a writer.
100%.
The thing I'm really curious about is you talk to artists who became writers, or you talk to writers who are also artists, and that part of the brain sticks, it sticks with them. How does that side of your brain continue to play a part in how you think about comics going forward?
Well, and it's not just the being an artist. And you're right. I had started my path, my very, very strong-headed path to be a comic book artist at a very young age. My mother had reminded me how I had stood up at a Passover table and announced that I was going to be the artist of Spider-Man. I was 6 or 7.
Wow.
And it was like the minute you figure out that's someone's job, I'm like, well, that's my job then. That's without any realization of how many obstacles and life things are in your way. I just like, that's it. All right, how do you get there? And I just stayed on the path, no plan B. Every job I took to pay a bill was in service of the goal. And by doing so, and I was self educating myself through the entire process of how to make comics. Like there was no, I genuinely, I always, this is my old man bit, but when I was a kid, there wasn't internet, and there was no real classes in comics or anything like that. You had to go digging like an archaeologist and kind of reverse engineer a lot of things to figure it out. An issue of Comic Scene magazine would have an article about how inkers influence the pencils, and that would be it for the year. Like, I'm going to study this like the Torah over and over and over again. But I did. I was like, and it's funny when you break in and you meet other people your age or your peer group, and you realize that we were all doing that exact same thing. So, I literally teach college to teach the class I wish I could have taken when I was in college.
That's awesome.
So that and when I and the difference even between then, when I started teaching, there was a few classes around the country. Now it's almost everywhere, and that's amazing.
Yeah.
So the difference between the world we are in now and the world I'm discussing are very different. So I would spend a lot of time in my room, just okay, this is how you ink. All right, Tom Palmer said I should buy this pen. I will go buy this pen. And like whenever any creator said in an interview, and then I would discover that a lot of creators wouldn't share their secrets or wouldn't want to discuss failure, like in a comic buyer's guide or something. That was you would be very far in between because everyone was just plugging their books, right? But anyone who studies any medium will tell you that you learn a lot more from people talking about their failure than you do from their successes. And so I would just journey forth. And by doing so, I then said, all right, well, I need to learn how to write. And so I have something to draw. And I need to know how to do book design. And I need to know how to letter because I don't know anybody else in comics. And I don't have any money. So I can't hire anybody. So I just kept teaching myself all the things you need to do. I remember I learned hand lettering, then computer lettering, then and these are not things I'm very good at, but I was good enough to to put the page together. So but by the time I was ready for mainstream, quote unquote mainstream comics, I had become a jack of all trades in all of comics, and I didn't do it for this reason, but boy oh boy did it set me up to communicate to all of my collaborators better than some others can. Like anytime I'm asking an artist or a designer or a letterer to do anything, I'm doing it with and I know how to do this, so I know how to speak to you in not only in a polite way, but in a professional way. So I'm very grateful to myself for that, but it's not why I was doing it.
No.
I was doing it just out of necessity.
And I think that's amazing because I think when you're working on a creative team, whether you're talking about for hire, you're talking about creator owned or whatever, it's trust and communication are super important. And if you can have empathy for the position that somebody else is coming from or the position somebody else is fulfilling in a book, I feel like that makes a major difference in the outcome that comes from it, perhaps.
It does. And sometimes it's almost on a subconscious level. Even with my collaborators, I can see it. And then when I talk to other people and I hear how their collaborations are going, it's a reminder of how lucky we are to communicate well.
Yeah. Now, I do want to ask one question.
Sure.
Do you still draw?
Yeah, I mean, and I will draw again. I know that sounds weird, but there are certain projects I have that I'm like, no, that's for me. I'm going to draw that myself. But it's just I know it sounds weird having so many years have gone by since I've actually like drawn anything, but literally since I stopped working, I think Fortune and Glory was the last like published full thing I did. I've been teamed up with not just artists, but genuinely with the greatest artists working in mainstream comics or comics anywhere. So everywhere I turn, there's someone just better at it than me. Why wouldn't I do that? And I'm addicted to it. It happened even just before we got on the phone. I got some pages from Ivan Rice and some pages from Ryan Sook, and it jazzes me up. It really. I'm completely addicted to the collaboration. So I tend to keep going as a writer, but yeah, eventually I will do so. And also sometimes I just have to draw something out to communicate the idea to people, but I only do that in most extreme, bizarre design circumstances where I can't find the words.
Sure.
To do it. I learned early that no artist really wants that sketch unless they flat out ask for it. Hey, could you doodle that up and show me? That's happened all the time.
Yeah.
Right. And then I'm with my kids and we're drawing and I'm teaching them how to express themselves through whatever artwork they want to express themselves through. So yeah, I do draw, but not professionally. And but I don't want to sound like a Steve Ditko thing where I have a whole graphic novel here I'm not showing anybody. It's not that kind of thing. But yeah.
Yeah, I'm always just curious about that because it's like, another question that's always in my head involving DC related things is I'm always curious. Well, the answer has been, there's definitely been an answer during this whole pandemic. I was wondering how often Jim Lee still draws. The answer is a whole hell of a lot. But
Jim and I, there's quite a few of us that, there's an emergency, get to work. We just immediately get to work, and we it's for different reasons. I was like this before, before I had a near-death experience, but it just some of us are very, very focused on family and work.
Yeah,
that's not everything else. You get to a certain age where there's just everything else is a waste of time.
Yeah.
So and there's just been times in my life where I've had to look back and go, okay, what am I proud of? What am I, you know what I mean? What am I not? And I never look back and go, oh, that tweet was my best. It's never social media, any of that nonsense. It's just the work.
Yeah.
So,
well, we were talking about artists, and I want to jump into Powers a little bit. It's really just like to talk about Oming and to talk about all the other artists you work with.
Talk about that lovely man all day long. He's one of the best humans on the planet.
He's a remarkably nice guy. But
yes.
I did want to, so you worked on that with Oming, with Michael Avon Oming. You have a long history of working with pals like Oming, Alex Maleev, David Marquez, David Mack, etc. But you also...
Ask me what I'm most proud of in my career.
Working with friends?
And also the longevity of our collaboration and all those people you just listed. There's no end in sight. We are family. We are brothers. We are together forever. We've been through everything together. It's more than just collaboration on art. It's a life of experience with these people, and I'm deeply proud of it. I really am. And
that's the thing I'm really interested in is when you have so much longevity, especially in comics, where let's face it, like your run with Mark Bagley on Ultimate Spider-Man will, like, the 111 issues?
Yeah.
It will never be topped because we're in an era where it's really tough to keep teams together for a long time. And yet you have this longevity with a core group of creators, with a core group of artists. How much does that fundamentally change the experience for you versus working with, like, I know you said in an interview before that you didn't have a really, significant relationship with Stuart Immonen before you worked with him. Is there a difference there, or is it still largely the same?
It's weird because so we just listed a bunch of people I have a very close relationship with, and then there's other people who I've worked with very famously that I have no relationship with,
right,
at all. Like I don't think I have Stuart Immonen's phone number, right? And then there's other people. Boy, that was a lot of fun. But projects take us elsewhere. It's Hollywood, so projects take you to different collaborations, right? So and we're like completely lovely together. But we're just not working together right now. Perfect example, John Romita Jr. We had a great time in Avengers, and then he went off to do other things, and then now we find ourselves back together many years later. But it doesn't feel like any time has passed, and it's lovely again. So it's always a mixture of things.
Sure.
So that can be confusing to the audience, like who's friends and who's not friends. Because not just me, but you see with other creators as well. But how does it change things? I must say, as I've gotten older, I appreciate the longer collaborations. As I said, I'm very proud of them, but I'm also proud of just like there's a handful of people in this world I can call up and go, let's blow something up. No, but I mean creatively. Let's completely strip ourselves of everything that we do and try something else.
Yeah.
And then go, great, let's do it. And that's a genuine blessing in my life.
Yeah,
it really is. And because it's very hard to say to someone, let's not do that thing we're famous for.
Right. Well, and I will say as an outsider that, and granted, I don't know the nature of your relationships with these people, but two of my favorite things that you've done are, I am like maybe the world's biggest fan of your arc on Sam and Twitch, Udaku.
Thank you.
I love it. But I think it's Angel Medina or Angel Medina.
Angel.
Yeah, Angel. That, I mean, you guys jived just really well from the jump. But then you look at that and you look at also, I think it was the Leviathan Rising. What was that the arc what you did with Steve Epting on Action Comics?
Yeah.
You and Steve Epting, I mean, that was boom, immediately.
I've done a few things with Steve Epting, and that's someone I have no relationship with at all. He is at least with me, just get the work done and get on with your life, which is completely fine. It's particularly when the work is of that quality, you know. But yeah, and every time it's been lovely. Every time, just great. Yeah, that perfect example. I don't know the guy at all. I don't. Yeah, but it's but every time we get together, it's wonderful.
Yeah.
But with Sandwich Twitch, see, that's where I first teamed up with Alex Maleev.
Yes.
And that whole Sandwich Twitch to me, and I appreciate you saying nice things about it, but that whole thing is like, all right, make all your mistakes here, so you'll be ready for Spider-Man, which I didn't know. But so Todd gave me, my first mainstream quote unquote work for hire gig, and literally let me just go nuts. He could not be more generous in that way. It was a mixture of him not knowing what he wanted out of it, but knowing he wanted something, and let us fly. And I was still like writing and drawing Torso and Fortune and Glory. So I was full in tour mode in my head, right? And I was not being the best collaborator because of it. I couldn't, you were talking about drawing too. It's hard sometimes to know where the writing ends when you're a full creator. It's all storytelling. It all adds to it. Even the inking adds to the storytelling. The blacks add to the tone. So it's hard to stop at a place, right? So I would like write an issue Sandwich Twitch and then draw an issue Sandwich Twitch and then send the layouts, and some of them were dense, to the artist saying, here, just do this. And that is terrible, terrible collaboration. Just awful. And they all handled it well, including Alex. And also some, but on the flip side, to be fair, some artists said to me, oh no, I like your layouts. I just want to sit in front of the TV and draw and not think. And if you did all the thinking, that's great, right? So it'd be a mixture of reaction, right? And that's kind of why it took me so long to figure out to stop. And two things happened here. I was writing for Alex, and I could not be more in love with Alex's work then till now. Just absolutely love Alex. And probably of all my collaborators over the years, the person I was trying to draw the most like that. That's the school I was in. But it was a huge struggle for me to get there versus just giving it to him to do. So I was working. I worked on Alex those last few issues of Sandwich Twitch, and then a couple of interesting things happened where Todd started writing the book after I left, and then I got to see what that looked like. And then I started working with Mark Bagley on Spider-Man, and he called. He's from Georgia, a lovely Southern gentleman, calls me up and goes, hey, those layouts you sent? Yeah, he goes, yeah, don't do that. that's and he said it so nicely. He goes, just so you know, that's my job. Like, hey, little indie guy who just showed up here, I've been doing Spider-Man for a long time. You don't have to do this, right? And I was mortified by the kindness, and never did it to anybody again. And I realized I was stifling and strangling some of my collaborators instead of being helpful, which is what I thought I was doing. So yeah,
Sandwich Twitch is interesting though, because it's like you mentioned, it was your first, I don't know, license work for hire work,
yep.
and so because of that, because you're playing with somebody else's toys, but you're also kind of doing it in. I'm not going to diminish Sandwich Twitch because I love it, but at the same time, it was like a smaller, lower visibility project, perhaps.
A perfect kind of book for someone like myself to make their mistakes on, and them not being devastating.
Yeah,
and also the mistakes I'm talking about were like not things you see in the final product. They were just collaboration mistakes, energy mistakes. Just things I learned quickly on the job.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that's what that feels like. Okay, don't do that. All right, that kind of thing, right? And again, I looking back, all it looks to me is a nice little trial balloon for me for when Daredevil and Spider-Man showed up, which was rather quickly. So all these lessons are learned by the time I hit my first issue of Daredevil, which included when me and Alex Maleev were reunited, I wrote for him completely differently on Daredevil than I did on Sandwich Twitch. So complete like what I saw going on with him and Todd and all the other things just made me go, oh, I was strangling this dude. This is crazy. I couldn't wait to get back together with him.
He never asked you where the layouts were now?
No, we talked it through, and he was, yeah, he was cool. I did, it was funny because from Alex's point of view, he went from a guy who's writing a full script and then drawing the whole thing and then shoving in front to Todd who would call him up on the phone and tell him the script.
Oh, wow.
Which is by the way, a legitimate way to do this, but I would never do it. But I know others who have done this, and he would call up and go, 3 pages of a gunfight, and then it gets emotional, and then Alex is just writing it all down. It could have been a more different experience, and then Alex's artwork under that freedom ballooned. It exploded, and that's where my embarrassment came. Then I realized, oh, I should not be visually directing this in any way, shape, or form. And then also Alex was like the storyboard artist for Alfonso Cuarón and other people. Like he had a quite a legacy already under his feet.
Yeah.
Of storytelling that I should have acknowledged and used, which is exactly what happened in Daredevil, and beyond.
I feel like you, in a weird way, kind of came into comics at the perfect time for you to learn all of this stuff without having, I don't want to say fear, but like you had like the ability to risk a lot because, when you first started Marvel, it was a completely different world. In some ways, it felt like it was gasping its dying breaths as you like walked into the Marvel bullpen for the first time, from what I understand. Do you feel like coming into Marvel at a time where maybe they were a little bit more able to risk a lot because they didn't know what tomorrow brought, made it aided your ability to tell the types of stories you wanted to tell?
Oh yeah, and what you're describing is absolutely true, and it's the thing that people today they can't even wrap their heads around. You tell a teenager today the Marvel was in bankruptcy.
Yeah,
they were flat out selling filing cabinets for cash when I visited the office, and when you think of that compared to how people perceive Marvel and their logo today, it seems crazy, but that's exactly where it was. They were on their last legs. Many, many, many people had left the company to pursue work in video games and other future forward endeavors because it looked like comics were about done. And also there was a nice thing with me where I had tried to break in for so long. And by the way, at age 6, that thing I told you, yeah. I had then started submitting to Marvel at age 6 constantly way up until the moment they hired me. And so I need this turned into I don't care if they ever hire me. I had gone into I deeply don't care anymore, but not in the I don't care, in the really not care. You have to really not care.
Right.
And I'd gotten there and then they hired me. And so when they sat me down with Ultimate Spider-Man, I deeply remember feeling, well, if they like it, and they don't, they don't. And that's probably the best attitude I could have had back then, and that's what they needed. So it was a nice mixture of everyone involved there. When I guess this is the beginning of the end. Am I writing the last Marvel comics? Those thoughts were in my head. You couldn't not think it. So it compared to that now. So yeah, a lot of chances were taken, a lot of choices were making, and not only with the storytelling, and this is the part I keep trying to remind people in our business, but with marketing, there was a whole lot of innovative marketing that went around Ultimate Spider-Man and the Ultimate line particularly, that then bled into bigger initiatives like Astonishing X-Men and New Avengers, the things that really when the planes really started to land commercially.
Yeah.
The marketing was a big part of it, and sometimes that gets lost to the publishers, or they just hedge their bets. And that is, if you believe in something, you have to go full blast into the market with it, or it just gets lost. There's been other attempts at Ultimate Spider-Man projects, and they forget, no, it wasn't just the quality of the material. It was the fact that Marvel shoved a free copy into every Payless shoe they could find, stuff like that. No, there was an 8 or 12-page version of it, in every shoe in the world. And yeah, not every single person became a reader of ours, but it definitely made a difference that kept us going for quite a few years.
Yeah, I mean, a perfect example of like what you're talking about. Obviously, nothing to do with what you do, but when I was growing up, I loved Bone by Jeff Smith,
Yeah.
and there was a whole generation of people who discovered comics because they discovered Bone in Disney Adventures.
100%, perfectly said. Or even DuckTales in the grocery store line.
Hmm.
That is where these things, they really do help. And when they're gone, you can feel it.
Before I got into writing about comics, I only really had one comic friend because I live in Anchorage, Alaska, where we're
Sure.
we're,
Okay.
we're very separated. And then beyond that, you just it's hard to sniff out who likes comics and who doesn't. And so my one comic friend, there's two things that I think is really fantastic related to his relationship with your work. One, he actually wrote a book report in high school about the first volume of Ultimate Spider-Man.
That's awesome.
Because it was so meaningful to him. And I think it was like the first Spider-Man comic he'd gotten into. And then second, he'd never read Avengers before New Avengers. And he got into it because it was something different. And I think that there's two things that you can take away from that. One, the marketing worked. It was speaking to people who don't normally read Spider-Man, and it is speaking to people who don't normally read Avengers. And beyond that, there's value in doing something different.
Yes. Yeah, but for publishers, it's always hard because they try a lot of different things every day and they don't always work, and then
Right.
they point to they don't always learn the right lesson from the failure. It's not that you tried something different. It's an energy or a marketing. There can be other elements to it too. But yeah, that's very cool. It actually reminded me. I wrote a book report in high school about X-Men and the Starjammers.
Nice.
And the funniest thing that happened, I remember about it, I wrote this whole thing up, and I'm sure it was exhaustive. And because I was just like letting loose, right? Basically writing like a podcast for my teacher. And then I handed in, and the teacher gave me like an A+ and said, "Such imagination! I can't believe you came up with all this stuff." Like, she didn't get that I was doing a book report. She thought I invented all the Starjammers and handed it in, and I didn't correct her.
Well, you got the grade.
I got the grade and just kept on moving. But yeah, but I did tell my friends, but it was very funny that she thought it was me. Anyway,
Do you feel like with Daredevil and with Ultimate Spider-Man, I think the interesting thing is when you were coming up, you were doing nothing of the sort involving like superhero stuff, and then you said that you had resigned yourself to not working for Marvel after years of wanting to.
yeah.
At that point, were you just like, okay, I'm in this for good once you started having success, or was there even a little trepidation of like, I'm gonna do this for a bit and then maybe I'm gonna get back to my own stuff? What was it like back then?
It all felt very it all felt, again, Marvel was selling filing cabinets, and everyone in the world was telling me, I guess you're writing the last comics. And so it all felt very like I got in just at the end, and at the same time barreling ahead with just this gusto of, also there's other people around me, like Joe Quesada particularly, who's trying to save it all.
Right.
And did. So when someone next to you is that gung-ho and's got their head screwed on so tight and they're like, we're going to make this work, I'm like, all right, we're going to make this work. Like I finally found someone who in a boss situation could inspire and lead me to higher places creatively and commercially. So I went from feeling, all right, guess I'm last man in, to, oh, hey, are we turning the ship around? And the ship turning started slowly, and then it really started to happen quickly. And so about a year in, you're like, oh, and then all of a sudden we're having retreats and we're getting back, like things started clicking, and then I was exclusive. Right. So once you're exclusive and you have years to go, you go, okay, let's settle in and really make some plans here.
Yeah.
So things started to change quickly. But yeah, it was very strange. If you're asking what's strange, it was a very strange feeling.
Yeah.
But like even all of independent comics is strange. It's a very weird lifestyle to like make comics all day and then hustle the conventions, and it's a whole lifestyle choice. And yeah, so I look back on all that, but I also, all I think about is the people you mentioned before, is like, there's David Mack, who got me in the door, and Mike Oeming, who, like, we're all just there together. trying this. So, and also, you mentioned Mike Oeming before. Mike and I had met. He had already done this. He
Right.
was the inker of Daredevil at age 14.
What?
Yes, or 16, like a really early age. He had broken in. He's a very confident line, and he had gotten some work. Yeah, he had already like written and drawn a Judge Dredd run at DC, and he was very young. And then the market crashed on him, and then he had to like reboot, right? And that's where Powers came from.
Mhm.
That's where we met. But so I had a friend who'd already been through the mill and told me all the stories. So I had like all kinds of like information in my head as I was barreling through and into all this.
That is, I mean, that's deeply fascinating. I do think though it's interesting when you look at that decade, the 2000 to 2009, and like a lot of that period from Marvel. I think you could make an argument, and I'm not going to make that argument because I don't want people to yell at me on the internet, that might be like one of the most creatively robust periods for Marvel ever. And I think a lot of it comes from maybe the fact that there was a lot of people who were emotionally invested in not only keeping this going, but once it seemed like, okay, we found our feet, we found our ability to stick or stay alive, then trying to build off of that energy and keep going. Because, from there you went to Alias, and then you did Avengers Disassembled, you did New Avengers, then you did House of M, et cetera, et cetera. And it just seemed like it kept like building from there, which is really amazing.
Amazing. Totally. Looking back on it now, yeah, it's a great mixture of arrogance and inspiration. No, there's a place where arrogance really can pay off in a good way.
Absolutely.
It can't be full on, and you have to have something to back it up. But and also let's not discount that Mark Millar was sitting next to me, being very Mark. In a way that I would never be. We were a weird boy band that was put together of different temperament, but the same goal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the whole time I was working with Mark, I would be like, I would never do what he's doing, like in a million years, and then yet would find the same successes.
Mm-hmm.
It was very, very funny to me. Yeah.
And now a quick word from our sponsor. You might know Rico Renzi as one of the best and brightest colorists in comics, coloring comics like Spider-Gwen, Sea of Stars, and many more. But he's also a guy who does amazing designs on shirts, books, stickers, and more at nolongermint.com. On No Longer Mint, you can find all kinds of amazing stuff. I have a shirt from them that features Kraven, the Hunter, with wearing a vest of Garfield saying, "I hate Spider-Man," and also Mondays, which is genuinely incredible. I love it. Honestly, Rico's merch is absolutely hilarious, whether you're talking about his shirts, his books, his stickers, everything. If you're a fan of comics, of pop culture, of anything, nolongermint.com probably has something for you. I highly recommend going to check it out. I'm a big fan myself. This is one of those situations where it's really easy to talk about a sponsor because I just love Rico's stuff, and I think you might also. So go to nolongermint.com and check out all of his merch. And now, back to the show. I want to ask one question about that period specifically related to the Avengers, because I was out of reading comics when Avengers Disassembled came out. And when I remember reading it, I was like, damn, this guy is not messing around with this. Because, in the way that comics work, it just seemed like you were breaking the Avengers.
Yes.
I have to ask, what was the most memorable negative response to that?
Well, it was... Well, the most memorable is the one that I learned the most from. When someone says something to you and you go, "Oh, you know what? That's a good point." Like someone is able to describe their frustration in a way that just doesn't sound like a tantrum. You know
Sure.
what I mean? And we've seen both. You know what I'm talking about. A lot of it comes from I came in as a crime fiction writer. I was full blast a crime fiction writer at that time, and I wasn't really doing much of anything. And I was studying it over and over and over and over again. So I was applying a lot of the rules of crime fiction, sometimes even subconsciously, to these projects, right? And that was really working for me. There's a lot of crime fiction even in Ultimate Spider-Man, right?
Right.
And that was really doing me well. And then when the Avengers job came, and it was not a job I was looking for, it was not a job I was auditioning for, but we were at this retreat where it became clear that a lot of big moves were going to be made, and either Mark and I were going to take over Avengers, based on the conversation we were having at the retreat about why isn't the Avengers the coolest mother effers in the Marvel universe. I ended up having the gig, and then it was all right. Well, let's do something that really grabs everyone's attention and makes the Avengers which were not at that moment a centerpiece book, right?
Right.
And like, yeah, let's blow it all up, and with a kind of, not a nastiness, but it's certainly I could see why some people, if you're a fan of She-Hulk, you're like, hey, dude, what are you doing?
Right.
Like, and that was a great lesson for me about the energy of a story. Not that I blew it up with the viciousness in which we blew it up was I think where people were getting a little twinge, and and also it looked like, because everything we were doing at that moment had such a finality to it that, like, oh, I guess this is the end of the Avengers. Whoa, there was a belief in what we were doing that people don't always have. Like when someone gets murdered in comics, I'm like, well, he'll be back in 6 months.
Right.
Like, but that was not how this felt. So, I think the lesson I learned, that's the first time people started really beating the hell out of me online. They were very angry at me. The Jack of Hearts people were mad at me. And
Jack of Hearts people. I didn't know there were Jack of Hearts people.
Well, that's it. Well, here, you want to know the lesson. Every character has people. Everybody, there's a fan of everything. There's at least a thread somewhere, celebrating this character. So even though you may not have that passion for that character, someone absolutely 100% does, and there's a reason. And as the writer of that character, if you don't, even if it's for a moment, you should go find out, if you don't know what it is, why that character has any charm to it.
I just want to say really quick, Brian, I have a Fin Fang Foom card framed directly to my right now. So I get it.
And I have one of those Fin Fang Fooms that are the Hero Clicks, but the giant one.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I have that.
That's
anyway,
awesome.
So, but my point is, not to be too all over the place on this, but because it was a very complicated subject in my life, that the criticism was valid because I was blowing up. It was tantamount to me walking onto a playground and just kicking over someone's toys because I had a better toy.
Right.
And that's not the way to do that. That's not what I meant it to be. But may make that clear. That's not what it felt like in my head. But for someone who was flat out enjoying the Avengers every month, for whoever this little bald jerk is to come in and trash it, was off-putting. Only after about a year or so of New Avengers did people see my deep love was sincere, and that I was trying to get to here. Right? I was trying to get to a place where everyone could appreciate the Avengers as much as us diehard people do, and I was so grateful I was able to accomplish that with David and everybody else. But when you blow everything up, it does make people just cock their eyebrow and go, "Who the hell are you?" and they were right. By the way, I did not kill Jack of Hearts. I brought him back as a zombie. That's what I did. So I get a lot of. People get still mad at me for killing Jack of Hearts, but Jeff Johns did that.
I do think it's interesting. Like, New Avengers is one of the all-time great jumping on points, I think. Because like, I mean, what was Avengers Disassembled if not a basically you're tearing things down so you can build it back up.
Yes.
But I do think it's really interesting because you were coming from, like, I think that a lot of the stuff people know you for are street level books that feature solo characters as the lead. And so, like, you jumping into that, I wonder how much of the trepidation came from, like, oh, look at this guy, he's like the Daredevil guy and like the Ultimate Spider-Man guy. He doesn't even know how to do a team book. He's just like the guy who's used to like having people hang out with stuff. And I
Well,
don't know.
I think I publicly said I'm not a team person. I had at one time been the writer of Ultimate X-Men, and I couldn't wrap my head around it in a proper way.
Hmm.
And I just wasn't ready then. It was a little bit too much after. I was still learning all my lessons on Daredevil and Spider-Man, and it's basically graduate school, right? And
Right.
I'm learning everything all the time. And then I dropped X-Men on top of it, which on its own is probably one of the hardest books to write in any mainstream universe, and I just wasn't there yet. And I think just to free myself of the shame, I made it public, right?
Right.
And then a year later, I'm literally blowing up Avengers Mansion. But I had. By saying out loud, I'm not a team guy, I was so mad at myself. I was so mad at myself. I'm like, are you a writer or not? Are you a storyteller or not? All your heroes did books like this. Why can't you? Figure it out. And then I spent all that time figuring out how to get to Avengers. So by the time I got there, but no one knows I was doing that. I didn't announce all that. I'm not a team guy, and then blew up a team book.
Well, and I imagine part of what, you've been working in comics for a long time. It's just like, I guess you're 28 years or so in. I mean, in like professionally.
I'm going to say this out loud for the first time because it literally happened this week where I was shown, oh yeah, my first published work was 1991.
Wow.
Don't go looking for it. And so next year, I'm 30 years.
Right. Wow.
Which is shocking because I'm only 38 years old, so that's weird being able to do that. And I'm joking, but in your head you don't feel that old, or you don't perceive yourself as that, or what that feels like to other people.
Mm-hmm.
It's a weird thing for me, particularly when I'm in a room full of other creators and who are younger than me. I don't see myself as that, right?
Yeah.
Even though they might.
I always tell my wife that I still feel really young, and then she scoffs at me because I just recently injured myself in some new way. So she doesn't believe me, but whatever. We're both still young, Brian.
Well, no, also I remember even reading like Dark Knight Returns, and I think Bruce Wayne was my age, and me going, well, that's insane. No one could be Batman at that old age. And now at this age, I think this is really the only age I could have been Batman.
Yeah. Well, related to that, you're coming up on your 30th year.
Yeah.
Crazy. I think like what you're talking about, the team thing is really important, because I have to imagine that if you never found ways to challenge yourself, if you never found new ways to, like, I don't know, bring like fear to yourself to be like, how do I solve this problem? You wouldn't have lasted that long in comics. You had to keep pushing yourself. Is that how you feel?
I tell this to my students. I tell this to anyone who will listen. Everyone is, and I guess we live in a different world now where failure can come with such public shame, right? People really beat the hell out of you, right, for trying something, right? And or people are worried about it. Let's say that the fear of it is much more real than the actuality of it. But there are a lot of creators who don't want to get the shit kicked out of them like I did on Avengers. They don't see that the shit getting kicked out of me is not what I remembered for. It's all that matters is the work, right? And this whole weird situation we find ourselves in, it's been for creators like us, it's been a lot of people revisiting work or trying the work for the first time, and that's all that people remember. That's all that matters, right? And sometimes the things I got beat up for in the moment have aged well.
Right.
Not everything. I'm not saying everything, but I'll never be able to properly express to people how effing bizarre it was to watch people roar with applause at Ronan's first appearance in Avengers Endgame versus the amount of shit I got for in the first place. It was very strange. Or the amount of crap I took for empowering the character of Luke Cage anywhere I could. And then the server on Netflix breaking when Luke Cage season 2 came out from may all of you live long enough to experience I was right. Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cause it never feels that way in the moment. It's always comes later.
I mean, and Miles Morales is like a perfect example of this because I remember because I think Twitter was around when Miles came, and I
Oh,
remember
yes,
there.
it was. I remember very clearly some people saying some very nasty things. So,
Yeah, I mean, it was like I would say that the response was very mixed, but when you look at it now, when you look back, I mean, like that is insane. Like, I mean, like Into the Spider-Verse, you can make a very strong case for being like the best superhero movie, period. And Miles is like somebody that inspires everybody, but at the time, it was like this really bold thing, and I think it's really fascinating because the idea of change has such a fascinating relationship with superheroes. You have like
yes.
the whole idea of illusion of change, but at the same time, it's like so many of the biggest moments in superhero comics are defined by change, and
Yes.
so much of your career.
And what's difficult for people like us is that we all know that all these changes are always coming, mostly from a good place, when they're coming from a creative place, right?
Right.
Or an emotional place, not from a marketing place, but from an emotional place. Then marketing kicks in is a different thing than marketing says, hey, you should do this, right? That almost never works. Yeah, it's it's funny. It just so happened that when we were inventing Miles Morales, and it was a very long, protracted birth period, we had a lot of time to work on it. And at the same time, Matt Fraction and Kelly Sue were living with us as they were buying a new house, and they stayed with us for a while. And while they were staying with us, that's when Kelly Sue was developing what became the Captain Marvel that everyone knows today, right?
Right.
And both of us were getting, pretty beat up just for trying. And now people pretend like none of that ever happened, and we're like, creators say, "Go, you don't know what it's like." I'm like, I'm sorry, I cannot allow that revisionist history to go forward because you do not know what it feels like when someone like Glenn Beck comes on and says a bunch of crazy stuff.
Right.
Now, I'm grateful for that because I know that Glenn Beck nonsense, which then became The Daily Show and Howard Stern and Conan O'Brien all talking about Miles Morales, which would never have happened if not for Glenn Beck. And you can Google what he said.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
If not for him saying crazy racist stuff, all these people wouldn't have bit back at him. But the book took off. But at that time, for a while, it was just a lot. I've been getting a lot of racist stuff being thrown at me, and it was very bizarre to me because also it was at a time where we thought things were a little better than they were, which obviously they weren't. But for a while, there was a moment where we were hopeful, and so it's weird that in retrospect, people remember it more fondly than it actually felt.
Right.
If that makes sense. Yeah. By the way, and also people were flat out backing it hard and really supporting us. But you kind of only remember the person yelling, the Nazis had a point. That kind of only sticks out.
Well, and I do think it's a really interesting moment because, like I don't think people really realize like how big of a moment that really was in some ways because it was like it feels like a line in the sand moment, even for Marvel, but also maybe for you. Like when you look at that, it like. Once you did that and Kelly Sue did, Captain Marvel, it felt like Marvel kind of went through a change period, and even comics in general, where there was a little bit more interest in bringing these kinds of characters and this type of representation. And I'm not saying that they were never interested in that sort of thing because, you mentioned Luke Cage, you mentioned other characters. Mm-hmm. Does Miles feel like a moment where things changed a bit for you?
Yes, but it's such a slow roll because it was like, all right, we had these philosophical discussions if someone else could, wear the mask, right? Because now it's like anyone could wear the mask was our point, right?
Right.
But were we right? Who knows? I don't know. Like also, Spider-Man isn't broken. That's the other thing too. It's like no one was going, someone should really come in here and clean this up, right? It was we were fine, but we were just in success looking to see what we could do better. And that was a very fine place to be, of not resting on your laurels. It's one of my favorite things to do is well, you don't have to do this. It's kind of a cool place to be.
Yeah.
So we talked about it for a long time. We gestated. Then we had Donald Glover out there simultaneously gestating it to the public, right? Now that part I could not have imagined, planned for. That is what we call genuine happy accident slash, oh, the world is telling us something, right? So we were already off to the races, and the world started going, yeah, I'm kind of in the mood for this. There's an audience for this, and I will always be like deeply grateful to him for taking a lot of shrapnel for us as well. He took a lot of he's got stuff on Netflix where he talks about like how hateful it got, just the idea, just him going, I'd like to be Spider-Man. They're screw you, like just come like flying right at him. There's one on YouTube where he talks about like people going, well, how about we make Shaft white? And then he went, okay. I would watch that. I would love to see what that is. It's a very funny bit, but it describes how ridiculous the argument was about all this. But so that kind of like, he was kind of like a shield for us as well. And then we came out with the most honest work we could do, and then from that moment all the way to Spider-Verse, it was kind of like a doctorate thesis on, can you do this? Right. Can this work? It like even like as I was leaving Marvel, I was like, oh, does this like it's still like a theoretical that we were putting into actuality, right? Mm-hmm. So, but may I say, from the moment Miles debuted, it was a warm, beautiful hug. Like once people actually read it, that things got really, really great and stayed that way for the entire time. Even when I took some bigger chances on the book, some of which I immediately regretted and backtracked on. And then now that Spider-Verse like rests in Netflix, the hug is constant. It is all day long. It is everywhere. Like my Instagram could be full on just people TikToking Miles like all day long. It is beautiful. And I don't say that to brag. I say that because sometimes if people look at the lessons of, oh, I don't want to get beat up like Brian and Mark do, like online, but they don't see, it's not that I got beat up by 30 people. I get hugged by thousands, right? It really, and that's what it is. But the hug isn't something that goes viral, right? It's so I just try to, that's the lesson, right? And also, may I say the lesson is that from the moment me and Sarah started working together all the way through to meeting Lord and Miller, Miles has always been in the right hands, which is a blessing and not something I could have planned. It's just the right people, the right writer, the right director. Like everybody who's touched Miles has been kind of building their life towards it in a weird way, and that's why we find ourselves where we do with him. It remains a stunning thing in my life.
Well, and you look at what you're talking about, and we're talking about, like earlier we talked about like fear and like its position and how you create and everything like that. And I think that one of the lessons too is like, it's worth the risk. Taking risks is worth it because it could lead to 30 very unhappy people, but a whole lot more hugs. And I think that makes a huge difference. I do want to ask,
also, not to discount like stuff that I've let me make it clear too. And I say this in class all the time. Like I fear when people are scared, they're scared of being embarrassed. They're scared of failure. They're scared of getting the shit kicked out of them online. Whatever it is that they're scared of. All of it has happened to me, all of it, and I say that not in a braggy way. I just say it and I'm fine. It's all stuff I was also scared of, and you go through it and you learn from it and you apply it to your work and you move forward if that's what you want to do with it. But that's what you can do with it. You can learn from it and make it part of your life lessons. So I bring it up not in. I just like, look, it happens. Okay, you'll handle it.
Yeah.
And this is a very Seinfeldian attitude. I found that weirdly Jerry Seinfeld has become my Zen master. Very strange to discover this, but every word out of that man's mouth makes me go, yeah, boy, that really sounds real to me. and him finding that Zen philosophy of, no, I'm going to try really hard every day, and I hope you like it. And if you don't, okay, I'm sorry you don't, but I'm not going to get my energy nutrients from it.
Right.
That'll come from family, right? And I was like, nah, that's a good attitude to have. You care with everything you have, and then you do the best you can. And then if you know in your heart that you've done that, then that's all you can do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I just have, we're going to jump into DC in a second, but I find this to be really fast.
We skipped Oming, and I love him. I just want to say that. Sorry.
I find one thing to be really fascinating when I put this out into my Patreon and put it out into the world that I was going to have you on the podcast. I was surprised to find out that the number one question or subject that people had questions about was your X-Men run, which I find that to be really fascinating because you've done a lot of really amazing things, but maybe it's just a product of the fact that X-Men fans are notoriously passionate. And do you feel like it seems like that project maybe brought on some unique challenges, either through like that passion of the fans or just like everything you did on it? Was that a project that you feel like you learned a fair bit from, just because, I don't know. I mean, I don't know exactly what happened, but it, perhaps didn't go as smoothly as other ones. I don't know.
Well, it wasn't going badly behind the scenes at all. We were in a very good place. And I was gifted with this amazing conceit of the original X-Men coming to the day. That was an idea that had dropped into the Marvel retreats, the publishing retreats,
sure,
for a few years. And just as the Avengers writer in the back of the room, I literally would like turn to like Matt or someone and go, "Hey, what happened to that idea about the I wanted to read that book." And it wasn't going to happen. And then Axel came to me and said, "We want you to take over the X-Men." And I go, "Oh." And then he goes, "And please do that idea." I'm like, "Well, whose idea was it? I don't want to steal it." But it was birthed in editorial, and so I was off to the races with a very strong take that I may not have been able to get to on my own, which I was very excited about. So, I had a lot of friends who had written X-Men before me, and someone had said to me, the best thing you can do to be beloved as an X-Men writer is leave the X-Men. They'll never be happy with you while you're there. There's not everybody, by the way, when I say they, it's not everybody, but there's a corner of the fandom that doesn't know what they want, but they don't want that.
Yeah.
and also everyone, X-Men's one of these books that, like Batman, that wherever you were in your life when you first discovered it, that's your favorite thing. And by the way, why I'm such a comedy nerd is because there's so many connections between comics and the comedy scene like this. And they talk about on Saturday Night Live. If you ask someone who their favorite cast members of Saturday Night Live was, it's invariably who they first saw on Saturday Night Live. Like, oh, that Dana Carvey, because that was the first time you saw Saturday Night Live, and it never changes. So it's the same thing with X-Men or Avengers or Spider-Man. It's whoever was doing that book when you were at a certain age. So I laughed because my friend who said, if you want to be beloved as an X-Men writer, don't write the X-Men, stop writing it. I laughed at that thinking, well, that's not going to apply to me. Right. And then it did. So also, I had the genuine, glorious benefit of Jonathan picking up so many of my pieces and adding them to his glorious puzzle.
Gold balls.
Yeah, man, I would have never. I loved Gold Balls more than any character I've ever created. I would have never gotten there with him. And by the way, as I left Marvel, I did say to anyone who would listen, blow my shit up. Surprise me. Don't do cover versions of what we already did. Do your own thing. Like that's how I made my bones, right?
Yeah.
And I've had those conversations with Stan myself, that I knew that was the key to my success at Marvel, is that I wasn't scared to blow stuff up. Please don't be scared to blow my stuff up, right? And also I realized that a lot of us working at Marvel had no problem blowing up Stan and Jack's stuff. as it seemed to be that's the job. But when it came to some of our stuff, we wouldn't even touch it. Right. And that's when I realized that's when I started using the Hood as a major villain and the Sentry. These are great new characters that were like literally going to go away because no one else. Oh, you can't touch Sentry. That's Paul's thing, right? That's Paul Jenkins' thing. So I called up Paul and I said, "Can I use the Sentry?" He goes, "Please." I was like, it's insulting me that no one's using the Sentry. And then I found that was the reaction to almost any creator I called. And I said, "Hey, do you mind if I use?" "Yes, please." Like they don't want their babies to die like in a time bubble, right? So yeah. So I was so grateful to find myself in this regard with Jonathan and some of the other pieces that he used in his X-Men run, which then makes people go back and look at my stuff with clearer eyes, which is all what happens at the end of a run anyhow. They look at the whole run and go, "Oh, all the Avengers are still here. He didn't kill anybody." All right, so things clear up in once the whole piece is done, and then when the pieces are so additive to the continuity that's going on, just makes people very happy.
Yeah, I always think it's interesting because in the moment you're always so worked up. I mean, I'm speaking the royal you. You know, people are really worked up about these things that are happening, but there's always a rebound. There's always like that rubber band snaps back.
Yep.
And I think that people forget that in the moment. And I don't know.
Superman will take off the trunks eventually. It'll be fine.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I thought was really interesting when you left Marvel was I remember I did an interview with Matthew Rosenberg at Emerald City Comic Con, and I
love Matthew.
Yeah, and he was talking about how he was kind of bummed out because I think his first retreat was your last retreat, and he was like, "I finally made it into this room, and Bendis is leaving. What the hell?" And but I talked to him, and I talked to somebody who just did your Zoom writing class you did for the Hero Initiative, and they spoke incredibly highly of the experience. And
great.
I think that like a lot of this stuff
Zoom
really
classes are strange. I've been teaching for a long time, and I guess it's like the difference. I don't know. It's like just the performance of teaching in front of live people versus Zoom. You know, It's just, am I connecting with anybody here? Like it's just it's always strange. But I'm glad. It seems those classes went well, so I'm very, very happy about that. Thank you.
But I think the interesting thing with all of this is that, you know, even if you're talking about Portland State, you're talking about what you were doing there. It seems like you're really passionate about helping people develop, you know, their own passion, their own skills in the next generation of comic creators. Is that something that's important to you?
Oh, it's a pay it forward medium. There's a few mediums that are like this, but comics, because it's so intimate and it's just literally at you know, us alone in a room are and also many of us have felt the feeling of being helped and also not being helped. There's been creators that have not been helpful at all, based on their own fears. And then there's other creators like, let's say, just Walt Simonson. I hate to embarrass him yet again, but creators who seem to always go out of their way to help anybody. And Klaus Janson, there's a lot of people like that. And so when you are growing up and you meet people who are cool, you go, you know what, I'm going to try to be like Klaus Janson. I'm going to try to be like Walt Simonson, because that is how I would like to be. That's how I would like to be. Yeah. So also, I most of what we learned, all you need to do is hear it and go, oh, okay, and it's so helpful, right? So it's great to pass it down or pay it forward or what have you. And also, don't you? And you probably have this on your packet too. Isn't it great when you can recommend something to someone and it's the thing they needed?
Yes.
It's
absolutely.
Just the best. It's as strong a powerful feeling as actually writing the stories.
One of my favorite moments I've ever had involving my writing or my podcast is I was at Emerald City Comic Con, I think last year, and I was at a writer's table, and I was talking to them for a little bit, and somebody was waiting behind me to go talk to the writer, and I realized after I was done, I was like, oh, I'll walk away. It turns out the person was waiting to talk to me. And they wanted to talk to me about how, like, listening to the podcast made them want to, or like convinced them to finally make their comic. And like, they're like, I finally got it. I, put it together and everything like that. And I was just like, first off, I can't believe somebody was waiting to talk to me. Second off, I'm so thrilled that like that was inspiration. But I mean, that's the thing though, is you can't really control where people are and what people are inspired by and how they're inspired.
No, you can't. So, but what you're talking about, and it's something I live with and maybe my religion, is that The energy you put in the world is basically all you are, right? And the energy, and for creative people, that energy is in your work, right? So the energy, the tone of your work, the energy of your work really is how you are contributing to the fabric,
Mm-hmm.
right? And whether it's a big piece or a little piece, it doesn't matter. It's if you're touching two people, you're touching 1,000 people, 1,000,000 people, your energy is important. And I think about my heroes all the time, and their energy, and the consistency of their energy, and I try to emulate that wherever I can. And as you get older, as I was saying, all people remember is the work. All people remember is how the story made them feel. They don't remember any of the Twitter battles or controversies. It's and a lot of people are reading my work this month. Free of whatever the controversy of the week was, or whatever, they're just reading it, and the response is everything you'd ever want.
I do think that's an interesting part of the whole pandemic thing, though, is that I feel like people are so excited about getting something new and excited about engaging with comics because they've had like that separation that there's, I don't know, like talking to retailers, talking to creators, it feels like there's a lot more passion for discovering something new right now, and I think that's a really great energy.
Anytime you were taking anything for granted, even subconsciously, and it gets taken away from you, and for us it's comics, and for other people it's a lot of other things. Like I have a lot of friends who are musicians, and they don't know when they're going to play live again.
Right.
I've some doctor friends whose life is completely thrown to bits. So it's the things that we took for granted have been removed from us, and so you go, okay, I can't wait to get back and read new comics. I'm excited that throughout all of this, DC kept the lights on, and we've been making comics this whole time.
Yeah.
So here comes everything, which is a very exciting thing for me to tell people who need to hear that. During the pandemic, it's very hard to say, hey, we're still working. I didn't, you don't want to sound, again, like you say, tone deaf, but for people who needed to hear it, we got great stuff coming, right? And some of us really use the downtime to really like take a step back and look at what we're doing, and decide what we want to do with our work, and the energy and spirit that our work has, because that's something we've had to deal with a couple times, which is the world is different than the world you started making this project in. Does this project still hold the same kind of oomph that it would have? And what can we do to make that happen? After 9/11, there was quite a few bits and pieces where like, yeah, maybe not now. You know what I mean? There's just, just literally as simple as I had like Dr. Octopus, like, throw a building at Spider-Man, and you're like, no.
Yeah.
Again, it was written months before, and no one would know, and I could say that, and we just took the scene out. It doesn't matter what I thought it would be. It matters what it would be, and what it would be just tasteless. So this has been one of those times where we've been able to do that as well, not to be cup half full. And the other cup half full thing is how many people have been able to just spend time with the books that they bought that they never got to, mm-hmm. or were going to get to. I always joke that even in my DVD collection, like I had DVDs which were The Person I Am and The Person I Wished I Was, right? Like I had some unopened Akira Kurosawa DVDs, and I'd seen the movie, but I just hadn't opened this DVD. And like one of my friends came over and goes, "Why aren't these open?" And I'm like, "Because that's the person I wish I was." So it's been very. I gotta say, in the cup half full scenario of this scenario, is people are just home with their books, and they're just binging and reading, and even like today, it was just like, name a project, someone binged it today, and it was very cool.
Yeah, that is really cool. So let's talk about DC stuff, and I want to go back to art because I love Batman Universe. I think Batman Universe is just absolutely
Nick the best.
Nick Darrington. I mean, like, that guy is. You know what I really love about his stuff I really love like Darwin Cook's The New Frontier. Like that book is so great, but a big part of what I love about it is like the smiles on characters. Like there was like this unbelievable smile on those characters, and Nick has this joyfulness to his work, and like especially in concert with Batman Universe. But I think about that, and then I think about something like Event Leviathan, where like every single first page that Alex drew in that series was just like unbelievable. Like I remember I posted just a picture of the first page on Twitter, and it had like hundreds of likes, and I was like, I mean, it was just because Alex's work.
Yeah.
One thing I'm curious about is those are two dramatically different styles.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel that there are certain art styles that jive with your writing particularly well, or do you find that it's really just about finding the story that fits the artist?
It is 100% about me writing towards them. No matter who it is, no matter what. And I have a crazy project coming down the pike. I have a Legion Jam project where 44 artists, most of which are just, you wait till you see the whole lineup. It's crazy, right? And every one of them is doing one page, and but specific to that artist. And here's how so I told the artist, you pick the character. Like I didn't even like tell me which character you've always wanted to do. I want to do Wildfire. Great, you're doing Wildfire. And then from there, I wrote the scene for the artist towards the bigger story that we need to tell.
That's amazing.
But that was like the most intense version of what I always do is find not only want to work with the artist, but I guess it's something that Joe told me early on is that sometimes when you're like when your name's first on the call sheet or whatever, like they treat you like the writer gets too much say, right? So just by the nature of what a script is and by how the things go. So really, it's our job to make it their show, right? So I strip and this is where I can let go of all ego and just go what I would want from. If I was a fan of Brian Bendis, is I would want him to lean into Alex's work and write towards Alex and Alex only, and let that collaboration shine through that prism of that artist. So that's what I always do. And with Nick Darrington, that's one of those examples where we became friends over the course of the piece. We had both come to DC around the same time. He had come into comics fairly recently. We had mutual friends. Him and David Marquez actually worked together on the movie A Scanner Darkly when they were living in Austin. David ended up moving up here to work together, and we became very close friends. And then the Darringtons visited, and a lot of creative people visit Portland and just move here. And it's just a very strange thing, but you go, oh, this is what I wanted. This is the tone of the world I wanted. And so Nick and Tanya Darrington moved up here very quickly. And then now we're having dinners together. And now we're, sharing each other's notebooks. And then we go over to Nick Darrington's house and there's piles. They're on my Instagram if you want to scroll back. But we were going through piles and piles and piles of Nick's sketchbooks, which were tantamount to, I once saw Steve Rude's sketchbooks when I was younger. And they looked very similar in a phenomenal, only this person could possibly do this way. Right, they were filled with fully rendered, amazing pieces. Name the cool thing, he drew it. Right, and so just living with his sketchbooks and his notebooks and talking to him just informed every choice I made on Batman Universe. So that's where the collaboration is just like writing into them, but like getting as far. Like also once you see those notebooks, you're like, oh, you're a genius. Okay, I'm gonna like roll up your sleeves and get and try not to embarrass yourself because genius is drawing Batman, and those smiles on Batman's face is I genuinely think the face that Nick had on his face drawing. Sometimes you'll see this artist really will draw the face they're making. Right. When they're working. And sometimes you can see, like, if I see someone drawing, like, stressful faces, I literally will call up and go, is this script stressing you out? And sometimes I'm wrong, but I do feel, you can feel the energy on the page. And from right away, like Nick was dying to draw Batman. He's still, like, it's just a scratch for him. And And so it was just to give him as many things as he wanted to draw, on top of me trying to discover the DC universe through this character, was the mixture that got us where we needed to go on Batman Universe. Also, I was completely terrified of the project. I was flat out scared of it, and I just that same mental place I was when I said, "Oh, I'm not a team book writer," and then was immediately mad at myself for saying it out loud. Same thing when I met Dan DiDio, and he assumed I was going to ask for Batman, because I guess that's what everybody does when they come to DC. And I wasn't asking for Batman, and he was shocked. But he already had a Batman project for me lined up because he was so sure I was going to ask for Batman.
That's amazing.
And then he literally said, "Great." And then he goes, "Well, this is interesting." He goes, "What?" He goes, "Well, if you want to do Superman, I have this thing where I want Tom King to do Superman and you to do Batman on this other project. So that could be very cool that you're both doing Batman and Superman." And I'm like, "Oh, that could be cool." Right. And it was 100% the right choice. It was great editorial behavior on his point. It got everyone motivated to do their best work, but in a good space and whatnot. So yeah, it was great.
I do think it's really interesting that, because one thing I read was that the origins of Event Leviathan actually stemmed from a conversation with Dan as well.
100%. He flat out said to me in our first meeting, he goes, "There's a corner of the DC universe that is a little messy, and not by anyone's fault. It just so happened that every time someone was dealing with the spies of the DC universe, they invariably created their own new network."
There's so many spy organizations. So many.
We have Argus, Cadmus, Argus,
Checkmate.
Cadmus, and Checkmate. There was a bunch, and none of them were ever folded. They were just added to, right?
Right.
So then the fans would email right away as soon as we announced the project. They go, "What's Cadmus and what's Argus? What's?" So immediately Dan was right. It needs to be one good organization versus one bad organization, right? And Get Smart has Chaos and Shield has Hydra. It should feel more like that, and then we can build. And he was absolutely right about that. And he also knew that is one of my sweet spots. You mentioned fire. I've been doing spy work like from the minute I could write. So I was excited to do that and continue on. We're still working on that project right now. Checkmate will come out not when it was supposed to. It'll come out later, but that's literally the only project I had dinged through this weird pandemic. So I consider myself very, very lucky.
I had Jeff Lemire on the podcast last week, and actually really quick.
I love Jeff Lemire.
Jeff is amazing. And he was I made because I saw his comment on the post about Legion's Jam issue, and I saw him on there, and he had the first response was him just being jazzed about working on it. And I was like, oh, it kind of feels like there was almost like a fanboy glee to it. And he's like, it wasn't almost. There was straight up fanboy glee to it.
Oh, he had one literally we called 40 artists and said, you want to do this? Everybody said yes. And then when the pandemic hit, this was a pre-pandemic thing. When the pandemic hit, I went, oh, I bet this goes away. I immediately was but no, boo-hoo. I mean, people are dying. It's certainly not a big deal. But I was hoping to do it, right? And literally a week into it, most of the artists wrote and said, "We're still doing this, right?" Because in this madness that we're living in, boy, spending time with the Legion of Superheroes is a nice break.
Yeah,
right?
It's nice to envision a bright future.
And every single artist got into it. And for Jeff, I'm a big fan of Jeff's art and his storytelling. And but I do feel that Jeff has a lot of people calling him asking for Andrea Sorrentino's number. So, which people do that with me too. I know that feeling. So I also think he was, because he seemed stunned that I asked him to draw it. So, and he killed it. Wait till you see it.
But the thing about Jeff, though, is he was one of the things we talked about on the podcast was about, where ideas come from. And people are always like, oh, where did the idea for Black Hammer, how did you do all the spinoff books? But the thing is, one of the things we talked about is how there's very rarely a master plan with this stuff. Like inspiration can come from anywhere, and I do think
Yep.
it's funny that like those two projects, their origins were with editors. But do you think it's important if you're an aspiring comic creator, or if you're a current comic creator for that matter, to like be open to where your ideas can come from?
Yes. And there are some creators today that won't take an idea from an editor or won't take a note. And I'm like, well, you're just missing out. You were just, and by the way, and then there's also editors who have trouble, finding a good note too. It's not like a universal truth, but if you're surrounded by good people, use and listen to them, and also if even if someone you don't agree with their mindset, I listen. I why do you think that? All right, and you'll find yourself spending a lot of time with that too. But yeah, and by the way, there was other things that Dan offered that I'm like, no, that's not for me. You don't know that about me, but that's something I've tried and know, and I don't want that energy out in the world, right? So it happened to be that these two were really the right thing, and also the Batman thing. I was saying no a couple of times. I really was panicked about it because Batman is Batman. And for someone my age, and I think you and I seem to be in the same boat here, I came up when Batman was the highest artistic statement you can make in comics. Like, it wasn't just all my favorite creators did their best work on Batman. They made their art on Batman. They made their statement of comics on Batman. So you can't help but once you were given Batman on his 80th anniversary, and go, what the hell do I have? Like, who am I? Who the hell are you? And I don't know if you saw me tweet about this, but as I was diving headfirst in all things DC, I was, flipping through the Batman Encyclopedia, which is one of those big giant hardcovers that armor and all the tanks, and I was going through it all, and there was an essay by Frank Miller, who is the reason I was panicking to begin with, and he said in the essay, he goes, it's so fascinating that of all the characters in pop culture, and I'm talking about not just in comics, of all of pop culture, Batman's the only one you could throw anything at and people still see Batman.
Yeah.
Because you can go from, and for our generation, it would be from Batman Lego Batman, which is a hit movie, right? To the scariest Arkham Asylum / Scott Snyder, the horror Batman, and still see Batman, right? And that doesn't work on Spider-Man. That doesn't work on Harry Potter. It's only Batman. And that was such a freeing thought to me. And just a reminder of whatever truth you bring to the project is the right answer, right? But sometimes, the legacy of a character could be so overwhelming that you can lose sight of that. But it ends up that I just needed to be reminded that whatever truth you bring is the right answer, and that's what we did. And for me, the truth was I need to go visit the whole DC universe. Batman and I are gonna go for a joyride. We're gonna go visit. I'm gonna spend the next few years writing all these places. Let's go find out what they're like.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, you open up Nick's notebooks, and he was already drawing them. So they made it very easy to put these pieces together. I must say, I was very grateful that people were into our mood on Batman universe. It was the thing I was worried about was to me, I said, okay, what can we do with Batman? Let's have Batman solve a case that only Batman can solve, right? So the tone of it, I thought, I hope people aren't put off by, and they weren't. They were totally in the mood for it, and that was great. And also, of course, it's all being shot through Nick's prism, which is a brilliant cartoonist prism, so that makes it a lot easier to take in. But yeah, that and also, not to bring it up again, and I hate to do it, but it has informed so many of the things. I had just come out of a near-death experience, and I was as close to the edge as you can get, and then I'm back, and I'm with Batman, and I'm clearly using this entire project as a healing project, right? I'm like, and so I'm healing all through. So then, lo and behold, the hardcover gets released like a week before all this hell broke loose. So most people are reading it in a place where they need some healing, or just some calm whatever Zen moment I was having with Batman, personally, Nick got it through to the end, and now people are feeling a very healing place with it while they're reading it. And only I know. Well, it's because that's where I was when this started, right?
Right.
Like I needed to get here, so that's deeply fascinating to me, and another reflection of that thing I'm talking about when I'm teaching about the energy of your work is all that's important. It's the most important part. So yeah.
Interestingly, I actually read the entire Batman universe hardcover when I was sitting in a COVID clinic waiting to get tested. And it was like, honestly, like I was.
Okay, right? Okay.
What's that?
Okay.
Yeah, I'm okay.
Did you
But
have it?
no, I didn't. No, I'd been, well, the weird thing is I'd been sick for like a month at that point, and it was like all the same, like, symptoms and everything like that. And apparently I was fine, but at the same time, it was just like, it was just a really scary time. And like, it's somehow that joy still shined through the fact that I was sitting waiting to find out if I had this like horrible thing. But going back,
and I'm so grateful for that, because I'm sure we've all had that experience. And I think because I'm an author, I know it more. But if you've ever been like, I don't know, maybe gross, but like on the toilet with a bad tummy and you're reading something, your bad tummy can actually affect your enjoyment of what you're reading, even if you know it's good.
Totally.
And I always I remember like having bad shrimp one day, and I was reading a book that I know I would like if I wasn't like having food poisoning. And I always think about that X factor when I'm listening to a reader. Like I'm like, well, maybe you had bad shrimp. Maybe.
Well, okay, so in Spider-Man 240, you wrote about like how this, your whole experience in the hospital affected you. And then you're talking about with Batman Universe. I'm curious, is that kind of the same? Is that the same kindling for Wonder Comics? Because Wonder Comics, I think, is just a delight. Like I loved Dial H. Like Dial H.
Oh, me too, man.
It was just incredible.
I could say that I'm not the author of that on any level. That all I did was say, Sam, Dial H. That's all I said, and he went nuts.
Yeah, and I had him on the podcast, and I was just like basically like raving. And he was like, "Well, Bendis made me do it." But I mean, like that, and like Wonder Twins and Naomi and Young Justice, there's a joyfulness to it. Did that kind of come from the same place, or was it just, why was that the angle you wanted to go with your imprint?
Oh, well, in the same conversation with Dan about Batman and all that, and when we were discussing what I would do if I came to DC, they had just had their first success with Young Animal, like this pocket, they call it a pop-up imprint. It's an imprint. It's not supposed to go forever. It's just going to be, we'll do it and then make some fun, right? And he goes, think about what you would do with an imprint. And then I was like, I wasn't thinking about that at all, right? And also I was like, oh, I'll definitely do a crime fiction imprint. That's definitely what I'm going to do. And then I realized that Jinx World was basically a crime fiction imprint. I mean, they're all, crime, the Pearl and Scarlet and Murder Incorporated are all very hard-boiled books on some level. So I'm like, oh, well, no, that itch is scratched. And then I'm like, oh, you know what? And also I had not finished any of my Marvel work yet. So I didn't know what I was going to miss, like what energy, and not characters, but what energy I was going to miss. And then as I realized that, I'm not going to be writing Spider-Man anymore. And with that, the energy of the Ultimate Universe would no longer be part of my life. And though the Ultimate Universe had gone away a couple years before, it was still very much a part of the Spider-Man I was writing, right? And so that energy and those characters and all his friends being there, that was all in there. And I was like, oh, I'm definitely going to miss that. I'm like, I wonder if I said to Dan, I go, oh, is there like a youthful like a line of and he said, well, we have DC Kids coming, which is for littler kids. And then he went, oh, Young Justice. And I went, why? He goes, well, we've been looking for a way to launch Young Justice, and I'm like, done. He goes, make that your tentpole book, and you've got an imprint, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, oh, great, right? And I love Young Justice. And I was like, that's fantastic, right? And then I went, and Wonder Twins. And he goes, what? And I go, I think, and I told him the story about my daughter having discovered my Funko Pop, Wonder Twin Funko Pops,
Uh-huh.
and how she literally thought it was the coolest thing she'd ever seen, until I showed her an old clip of Super Friends, and she's 6, she did not get it at all. But the idea of Wonder Twins was the coolest thing she'd ever heard.
Mm-hmm.
When I told it to her, she loved it. So I said, we need to do Wonder Twins, and he took a deep breath. And if I know there's anything that was greenlit during the genuine enthusiasm of me coming over, it was that. And and then I found out many people had tried to climb this mountain with the Wonder Twins and were not able to. So I was, and I literally said, all I have to do is find like the writer who will make Wonder Twins a must buy, right? No matter who you are. And Mark Russell was definitely the person. And that's someone I didn't know at all. Like,
Right.
I did not know him. I didn't even know he lived in Portland. I didn't even know, like, we were neighbors. And I called him and I said, I need you to bring that Flintstones magic to Wonder Twins. And I think just the joy of the ridiculousness of the ask made him say yes. You know what I mean? I think, you know what I mean? Like, that's the craziest thing. No, I never thought someone would call up and say that, so I have to say yes. And I've been there too, where I'm like, yes. So to answer your actual question, I wanted to replace not the storylines of the Ultimate Universe, but the genuine energy of it,
Mm-hmm.
and have it out there and be if I like, I know I can do that, right? So, and also I knew that that's a place where we could invent new characters like Naomi. Also, Ginny Hex is someone we're very proud of, and Ginny debuted. That's an actual co-creation between me and Nick Darrington. But it was very cool to put new toys in that toy box that spoke to the DC universe, but in a completely different way than I had seen before. That's the hardest part, by the way, when you're trying to be additive to a universe that exists, that you're finding a fresh take is very, very hard.
Well, speaking about fresh takes, one of the things I really love about what you've brought to the universe the funny thing is I keep complimenting books that you were like part of their origin story, but they weren't actually by you. Like, Jimmy Olsen is legitimately insane. Like, it is like the most bonkers comic, but I'm so glad it exists, and it kind of it's spawned from Event Leviathan, which when you read it, you're like, oh, this has nothing to do with that at all.
No, it does not. So, I had all my friends around me when I was sick, and I'd already signed this deal that I didn't think I was going to get to do. And so I had like Greg Rucka hanging out with me and just like sitting in my hospital room, and I'm blind, and he's just whispering to me about Superman in the most like meditative rabbi way.
Mm-hmm.
And as someone who'd already been through all the things you could do with DC, Greg had already done. So he was like my rabbi who had all the information, right? And there was Matt who always has a fitful relationship with mainstream comics. And then from all of that conversation in the hospital and then pouring out into our real lives, I remember going, and then it ended up with Greg taking Lois and Matt taking Jimmy, and us getting together every week and just like at my house and just like making a fire and sitting around talking about comics. And it ended up like Matt called it the Metropolis City Council, where we would get together and say, all right, we'll just talk amongst ourselves in the idea that the group of us together can probably find stuff in Metropolis that we wouldn't have found on our own, right?
Right.
And so we were all just talking it through. And I remember thinking when I read the first Jimmy Olsen script that if I completely F up on Superman, at least I'll be remembered for I got Matt to do Jimmy Olsen. And also it was completely selfish. Like, I love Matt Fraction's mainstream work, and I wanted I wanted him to feel the feeling I was feeling writing Superman, which is a very good place to live your life.
Yeah.
May I say, like, I'm heading towards the end of my run on Superman, so I'm being more reflective on it, and it's I will never be more grateful than I got to heal my near death experience through Superman, and then get through this pandemic. No matter what's going on in the world, I have to spend a few hours a day with Superman.
Yeah.
That's a gift. That is a gift. I know people feel it as a reader, like when you just sit with your comics, but also just unpacking a story for that character to be his best self is a very good therapy.
Yeah.
So yeah. So it was a lot of good energy being put out through friends. Is that also Matt had this really great moment where, all of us start deep diving. Like you go, oh, I'm the writer of Superman. I am now going to read or reread every issue of Superman that's ever been made. Right. And then I've done that at Marvel, but Marvel's legacy is literally half the length of DC's, right? And so that's twice as many, or maybe 3 or 4 times as many issues of Superman than there are of Spider-Man. And there's, because also there's action in Superman and Legion. There's all these mini series and maxi series, and also some of the best moments of Superman's world are in mini series and maxi series, right? There's Mark Waid's Superman and Birthright, and like all these things are, they have to be part of your DNA. So we dove in, but for Matt, Jimmy Olsen, those old issues of Jimmy Olsen were written with no concept of continuity or a shared story. It was just, what's the crazy ass thing they could think of that week, right? And then Jimmy Olsen's a lizard, and Jimmy Olsen's a giant monkey, and Jimmy Olsen's and so there was a couple moments where Matt had texted me like a panel of something from 1961 or something, and went, well, this is the craziest comic. And I go, but isn't it freeing to know that you will never be the craziest ideas, right? Like you will never be the craziest Jimmy Olsen. And I don't know if that made him go crazy or not, but yeah.
You threw down the gauntlet.
It's been a delight. And may I say, and this is the big shocker, that everything that happened, and Lois not so much a shocker, but things that are happening in Jimmy Olsen are in continuity and will absolutely reflect in my Superman books in a profound way. People go, oh, that's real. So yeah.
I really hope that means that somehow Dexstar makes it into Action Comics.
And isn't that the most Matt thing?
Oh, my God.
Welcome to DC Comics. Here's a blood-spewing cat.
Oh, my God. It was unbelievable. I mean, him and Steve working on that book is just such a pitch-perfect combination. It's unbelievable. But
and that's funny, too, because in that instance, I wrote, it's for the Leviathan special, and we were all going to share the narrative, and we each had a piece of the chapter, but we were also going to tee each other off, right? So I wrote my bits, and then I said, I know that Lois and Jimmy have to rescue Clark. So when they rescue Clark, they're going to be reflecting whatever the hell they just went through in Greg and Matt's story. Mm-hmm. So I wrote, just as a temp, the weirdest thing I can think of, which is Jimmy's dressed like this and Lois is dressed like Talia, and they've got a cat, the Green Lantern cat. I just to open them up to whatever idea you think of, I'll work with, right? And then I said, and I wrote, this is just temp, but you can go this crazy, I'll get there, right? And he wrote back, nope, I am doing the cat. I'm like he immediately went to DC Challenge, right? Remember DC Challenge?
I don't. No.
All right. Well, they did it recently with Commandy, but a DC Challenge.
Oh, right.
In our head, I found out later it wasn't as true as we thought it was. But when we were kids, we were told that one creative team would take the story to a shocking conclusion, and then the next issue was a whole other creative team having to take whatever the other writer did and make it work, no matter what it was. And doesn't that sound delightful, right?
Yeah.
So Matt immediately turned Dexstar into a DC Challenge.
I love it. It's incredible. Okay, well, last question for you.
Yes.
You said in an interview with Vanetta Rogers recently that when you're working, you basically need all types of stories to make your brain work. Like you said specifically, you said, but my project, I need 6 different ones. It's just how my brain works. And I thought that was really interesting because not only are you a notable creator in the sense that you've done, a lot of really great work, but you're always a rather busy guy. How have your varying projects, like, even just now in DC, you got, Action Comics, you have Superman, you have Legion of Superheroes, you have all the Jinx World stuff, you have Wonder Comics stuff, et cetera, et cetera. That's a lot. How do those varying projects inform each other, and how does that manifest itself in your work? Like, how does that strengthen your work, knowing that all different parts of your brain is challenged at the same time?
I wish I had a more coherent answer to this. No, I know I do. I think obviously I think about it because I say it out loud, because I do know even for other creators, I'm a weird one, right? Like I've dear for some of my best collaborators can only do one project at a time, and they can't even think of another project. They can't even talk about developing another project until they're finished with what we're working on, right? Mm-hmm. And I completely respect that. I'm not that person. So I have people constantly staring at me with, "You're doing that too?" But I do know that Legion and Pearl inform each other. Like Daredevil and Powers informed each other. Like they always do. And also there's something nice about, if you wake up in the morning, and some of these mornings, I can't say I've been in the mood to write Legion after looking at Twitter, right? Mm-hmm. But a few hours later, I might be. But so I write for whatever I'm in the mood to write, or wherever inspiration's hitting. It creates a world where I'm not shoving or forcing anything, which is sometimes in our deadline world something that happens. There's good ways to do that and bad ways to do that. For me, the good way to do it is to have other projects going on. I'm going to write Pearl. I'm in a Pearl mood until I'm not, mm-hmm. and then when I'm not, I go for a walk, and then some little tiny kernel of Legion truth will pop into my head, and then I'll be on Legion for 3 weeks. Right. Like nothing else on my plate. So it's literally a mixture of, one day I could be working on 6 different projects, and then another day I'm only working on Superman, and another day weeks have gone by and all I've worked on is some other thing. So to you, it feels like I'm doing all the things at once, but that's not always what it is here. It's a mixture of things. But by removing the creative stress of only one project seems to help the project.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, it really seems like it's not so much that you're like constantly splintering your brain in 6 different ways. It's really just being open to inspiration when it comes.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, you have to be. You have, and that includes. Last night I was so close to sleeping, and then boom, the little magic moment for Checkmate popped in my head, like that real little kernel that I'm like, I can't believe I almost didn't do that, and then I get up for an hour, put it all down, and then go back to bed. So it's having those notebooks near you, having your phone on you at all times to dictate into everything. You got to be ready for it. And also, you never go, like, while you're half asleep, go, I'll remember it tomorrow, because you won't.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that doesn't mean it's a bad idea. It just means your brain will punish you for not writing it down.
Some of my favorite emails to myself are the ones that I send right before I go to sleep, or like right after I've tried to go to sleep. And, I pick up my phone. And I'm like, I got an idea. And then I send myself the email in the morning. I'm like, what the hell am I talking about?
Yeah. Sometimes you wake up and go, I don't even know what that is, and just throw it away. But there's been many times in my life, more than I can count, where 2 weeks ago me was my best collaborator.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you, 2 weeks ago me. You really set me up well. That's right.
Well, Brian, I'm sure you're going to have plenty more ideas for us to read here in the near future, but that is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for coming on.
By the way, these were such good questions. I feel we only touched the surface of most of them, and I really appreciate that. Thank you very much.
You have no idea. I have so many questions, but you know what? We'll do it later some other time. But
we'll do it down the road. Happy to do it again.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Brian. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Off Panel with writer Brian Michael Bendis. You can find him on Twitter and Instagram at Brian M. Bendis, and his work in Action Comics, Superman, Young Justice, and Legion of Superheroes. As a heads up, Off Panel is once again brought to you by Sketch.com. Check out the new version of the site and consider subscribing for access to all the site's content and its members-only forum. If you're a fan of Off Panel, make sure to check it out on Patreon. If you back the show on there, you not only support it, but you get early access to each week's podcast, access to weekly content, and more. Also, don't forget to subscribe to Off Panel on iTunes or Spotify and give the show a rating or review while you're at it. You can find Off Panel and Sketched on social media by liking it on Facebook at /Sketched, that's SKTCHD, follow it on Twitter at @SketchComic, or following me at @SliceFriedGold. Big thanks to all my existing patrons, including AbductedTheComic.com, Greg Peterson, Andrew Carita, Matt Mahoney, Charlie Chu, Stephen Hall, Dan Lee, Cameron Schrader, Pensacola Pop Comics, Kim Eslin, Philip Mara, Christian Shelton, Kenny Porter, Chris Pachala, Torin Grunbeck, Fuzz Bubbles, Christopher Todd, Transmitter Down, Harry Sayer, Waltz Comics and Books, Carl Mizell, Danny Ollie, Paul Slates, Akil Wilson, Alex Dimitriopoulos, Terry Dodson, Troy Jeffrey Allen, Liana Kingus, Keegan Ray, Milton Lawson, Wesley Giff, Sean Kirkham, Harry Small, Alistair Ross, Julio Anta, Brett A. Schmidt, Jason Goodmanson, Paul Reinwan, Vita Ayala, Aditya Bidikar, Taurus Ferguson, Dave Slusher, WMQ Comics, Akil Kokachi, Phil White, Sean Pinello, Ken Heidelman, Philip Seavey, Al Ewing, Ryan Alcock, Nick Michelin, David Kelly, Rob Wilson IV, Nick Polito, Owen McCready, Brendan Fletcher, Gary Maloney, Jonathan Nilsson, Matthew Groom, Jason Massey, Adam Bogart, Xavier Files, Matthew Taylor, Tyler Turner, Nick Patera, Jacob Sorelli, Ford Gilmore, David Braldy, Ira James Udaskin, Nick Hall, Bjorn Basin, John Hendricks, Steve Anderson, Ian Maxfield, Cliff Chang, Benjamin Shipper, Colin McMahon, Chris Palmer, Scott McGovern, Nathan Fairbairn, Kat McKenzie, Greg Rucka, Adam Highfield, Fiona Staples, Chris Hallrent, Mark Abnett, Mike Murphy, Michael Shirley, Tom Barnett, Jim Demonacos, Norbert, Nick Lowe, James Kaplan, and Mission Comics and Art in San Francisco. You guys are all the best. A quick thanks to Upright T-Rex Music, who wrote and performed Off Panel's theme song just for the show. Check out their music on Spotify because it's completely delightful. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode.